Chosen one. The inheritance your grandparents left you wasn't just money and property. It was divine bait designed to expose every single enemy in your life and destroy them all in one devastating strike. We're talking about a conspiracy so massive, so diabolical, that it involved international practitioners, federal agencies, and a criminal network that had been operating for decades. Get ready to discover how God used your inheritance as the ultimate weapon to annihilate every single person who dared to come against you. The call came on an evening. You remember the exact moment because something about that instant felt different, like the universe had shifted into a new gear. The voice on the other end was panicked, desperate. Someone you once trusted was receiving news they never expected to hear. They were calling from a hospital room where they had just received a diagnosis that would change everything. The same symptoms they had been trying to create in you were now ravaging their own body with supernatural precision. Your grandparents left you something that would make your enemies desperate enough to attempt murder. Not just a valuable house, not just the land in multiple states you didn't know existed. They left you something so valuable that a criminal network spanning multiple countries would risk everything to steal it. The problem? Other people found out about it, and those people began to scheme in ways that would eventually involve federal agencies, international dark practitioners, and a conspiracy so vast that even seasoned investigators would be shocked by its scope. The conspiracy against you wasn't random. It was a calculated attack that had been building for an extended time. And the weapon they used? The very inheritance that was meant to bless you. Before that devastating phone call, your romantic partner started insisting on preparing all your meals. They became obsessed with your mental health, documenting every moment you seemed confused or tired. What you thought was caring attention was actually evidence gathering for a murder plot. The caregiver who raised you started asking questions about your inheritance paperwork, innocent questions about beneficiaries and legal procedures, questions that were actually intelligence gathering for something that would horrify you when you discovered the truth. During this same period, you began experiencing symptoms that doctors couldn't explain, fatigue that sleep couldn't cure, anxiety from nowhere, memory issues that made you question reality. You were being systematically poisoned, and the people doing it were building a case that you were mentally unstable. While you struggled with mysterious health issues, your caregiver was making phone calls to a lawyer who specializes in probate fraud. Meanwhile, international practitioners were being contacted about destiny manipulation techniques. At the same time, federal agencies were monitoring financial crimes that would soon connect to your case. Your enemies needed you weak, confused, and isolated before they could execute their final plan. They needed you to appear unstable enough that your death wouldn't raise suspicions. The timeline they were working with? A limited window to complete your elimination. The conspiracy against you wasn't amateur hour. Your caregiver had connections to a group that specialized in inheritance magic, people who had been involved in suspicious deaths across multiple states for over a decade. The network included professionals who could make murder look natural, a lawyer who specializes in probate fraud, a doctor willing to falsify medical records, practitioners who could perform binding rituals designed to trap souls after death, financial experts who knew how to move large sums without triggering federal oversight. They had done this multiple times before. Elderly people with substantial estates, young adults with inheritance claims, anyone who stood between them and wealth they wanted to acquire. Your case was just their latest target, though it would prove to be the one that destroyed them completely. While the criminal network was assembling, your caregiver was accelerating contact with practitioners in other countries. Federal agencies were building cases based on unusual financial activity, and your romantic partner was increasing the dosage. of substances being added to your food. The plan they developed for you was more sophisticated than their previous operations, because you presented unique complications. Your spiritual gifts meant traditional manipulation wouldn't work. Your ancestral protection required them to use methods that would ultimately backfire in ways they never imagined. They decided to eliminate you on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical poisoning to weaken your body. Psychological manipulation to destabilize your mind. Spiritual attacks to drain your energy and make you vulnerable to accidents. The timeline was accelerating. The international practitioners would arrive soon. The final poisoning phase would begin shortly. And something was about to activate in your bloodline that would change everything. The caregiver's desperation led them to reach out to practitioners in other countries who specialized in destiny manipulation, techniques for literally stealing someone's life path and transferring it to another person. These weren't local practitioners. These were professionals who charged substantial fees for their services. They required significant upfront payments and demanded assurances that the target couldn't retaliate spiritually. The caregiver agreed to terms that put their own life at risk if the operation failed. Federal agencies monitoring international money transfers were about to notice the payments. Your romantic partner was preparing to administer the final doses of poison. The criminal network was organizing legal paperwork that would transfer your inheritance after your death. The international practitioners arrived and began performing rituals at locations tied to your family history. They visited your grandparents' graves. They conducted ceremonies at properties you were supposed to inherit. They attempted to sever your connection to ancestral protection that had been guarding your bloodline for centuries. These attacks triggered responses from protective forces that had been dormant since your ancestors first made agreements with divine entities. Ancient defensive measures activated that were overwhelming in their intensity and surgical in their precision. The international practitioners were the first to experience what was coming for everyone involved in the plot against you. Within a short time of beginning their work, they started falling seriously ill with conditions that defied medical diagnosis. Several were hospitalized. One fled the country immediately, abandoning the operation entirely. Your psychic awakening was about to begin. Your enemies would soon realize they were outmatched, and federal agents were making connections that would bring down the entire network. Unknown to the conspirators, federal agencies had been monitoring members of their network for crimes unrelated to your case. Financial crimes involving offshore accounts, tax evasion schemes that had defrauded the government of substantial amounts, suspicious deaths connected to inheritance disputes in multiple jurisdictions. When your situation came to their attention through surveillance of international money transfers, investigators realized they were looking at the missing piece of a puzzle they had been trying to solve for an extended period. Your romantic partner was reaching the climax of their poisoning campaign. Legal documents for inheritance transfer were being finalized. International practitioners were collapsing or fleeing. Your psychic abilities were beginning to awaken at an unprecedented rate. Surveillance equipment was installed around your home. Financial transactions were traced back through extensive similar operations. Communication intercepts revealed the scope of the conspiracy and identified major players involved in the plot. Against you, the investigation revealed that your case wasn't isolated. The same network had been involved in numerous suspicious deaths over an extended period. All victims had substantial inheritances. All deaths were ruled suicide or accidental overdose. In every case, the wealth ended up with people connected to this network. Your inheritance had served as the bait that finally exposed their entire operation to federal scrutiny. Your enemies were about to realize the spiritual backlash was real. Arrests would begin soon. and your inheritance would be revealed as far larger than anyone imagined. And now, let us take a brief moment to honor the chosen among us. Here's to the ones who see the world differently. The silent guardians. The watchful souls. Always awake, always vigilant. They don't fit the mold, and they wouldn't have it any other way. While others walk familiar paths, they forge their own fighting unseen battles, illuminating the shadows. It's not for everyone, and that's okay. But if you feel it deep within, you'll know this is meant for you. No masks, no pretense, just truth. The Obsidian Inner Order is here, a place where kindred spirits gather to share wisdom, to connect, to transform. Over 450 strong, united not by conformity, but by purpose. If you're ready, you know where to find us. The link is in the description. If not, that's perfectly fine, because we're always here, watching over, making a difference in ways unseen. Here's to those who walk their own path, not for recognition, but because it's who they are. Here's to you. Thank you. As attacks against you intensified, something extraordinary began happening. Protection dormant in your bloodline for generations started activating in response to the spiritual assault against you. Your dreams became prophetic, revealing specific details about the conspiracy. You could sense when food had been tampered with. You began perceiving hostile energy radiating from people pretending to care about you. Your romantic partner's confession was imminent. Legal documents were about to be seized. International practitioners had collapsed and fled. Federal agencies were building toward mass arrests. The spiritual backlash was accelerating rapidly. You started acting on psychic information in ways that protected you from harm. You stopped eating meals prepared by certain people. You began recording suspicious conversations. You documented symptoms and noted when they occurred in relation to specific individuals. Your enemies noticed these changes and realized their window was closing rapidly. You were becoming too aware, too protected, too difficult to manipulate. They needed to complete their plan immediately before you uncovered the full extent of their conspiracy. The caregiver made the fatal decision to accelerate the timeline. They instructed your romantic partner to increase poisoning dosages. They scheduled the final ritual that was supposed to complete the transfer of your destiny to them. Federal agents were about to move in for arrests. Your inheritance would be revealed as worth far more than expected. The spiritual backlash would reach supernatural proportions, and a complete reversal of fortunes was about to unfold. While federal investigators built their case, spiritual consequences of attacking you were manifesting throughout the conspiracy network in ways that terrified everyone involved. Your romantic partner was experiencing severe health issues that mirrored symptoms they had been trying to create in you. Hair falling out, rapid weight loss, tremors, and cognitive issues that made normal functioning impossible. Coordinated arrests were being planned. Your psychic awareness was reaching peak levels. Simultaneous raids would launch soon. Hidden inheritance accounts would be revealed. Practitioners were beginning to abandon their practices in terror. The caregiver was dealing with financial disasters that appeared from nowhere. Investment accounts mysteriously depleted. Property damaged by natural disasters. Legal problems emerging from activities that have been hidden for extended periods. Members of the practitioner network were experiencing return to sender effects amplified beyond anything they had encountered. Several were hospitalized with conditions that baffled medical professionals. Others dealt with family emergencies, legal troubles, and financial catastrophes clearly connected to their involvement. The international practitioners who fled were reporting similar experiences in their home countries. The spiritual backlash was following them regardless of geographic distance, making clear that forces protecting you operated beyond normal physical limitations. Your life was beginning to flourish while enemies faced ruin. Legal settlements would add substantial amounts to your wealth, and the generational impact of your victory was about to become clear. Armed with information from surveillance and a confession that was about to come, federal agents prepared to move against the remaining active members of the conspiracy. That crucial evening phone call was climaxing. Spiritual backlash was reaching supernatural levels. The true scope of your inheritance was about to be revealed. Practitioners were fleeing in terror. The complete reversal was happening before everyone's eyes. The caregiver was arrested at a location where they were attempting one final ritual designed to sever your connection to your inheritance. Evidence at the scene included items stolen from your grandparents' estate, detailed plans for financial fraud, and materials used in previous attacks against other victims. The liar was arrested at their office while attempting to destroy documents related to the inheritance fraud scheme. Financial records seized revealed the scope of money laundering operations and provided evidence linking the network to suspicious deaths in multiple states. Several practitioners were found at various locations throughout the area, all engaged in coordinated rituals aimed at completing the spiritual attack against you. The precise timing of arrests suggested law enforcement had been guided by intelligence, sources operating beyond normal investigative capabilities. Your story was becoming the foundation for a federal task force. Similar networks would collapse across the country, and your platform for helping other victims would emerge. While your enemies faced ruin, the inheritance your grandparents left you was revealed to be far more substantial than anyone had realized. Hidden accounts were discovered. Property holdings in other states were identified. Investment portfolios that had been growing quietly for extended periods were transferred to your control. Network members were now in custody. Practitioners were abandoning their practices. The complete life reversal was demonstrating itself clearly. Legal settlements were multiplying your wealth. A federal task force was forming around your case. The total value exceeded all expectations, making the original conspiracy seem almost petty compared to what you actually inherited. Legal settlements from the criminal case added substantial additional amounts to your wealth. Your spiritual gifts had been refined through attacks in ways that opened extraordinary opportunities for service and abundance. You discovered that surviving spiritual warfare at this level had awakened capabilities that very few people ever develop. You became someone who could detect deception instantly, someone who could sense spiritual attacks before they manifested. Physically, someone who operated with confidence that comes from knowing you're protected by forces that never sleep and never fail. Even after initial arrests, spiritual backlash against your former enemies continued manifesting in increasingly dramatic ways. The romantic partner who confessed during that crucial phone call never recovered from health issues that began that night. Your inheritance had been revealed as worth far more than expected. The complete life reversal was showing itself clearly. Legal settlements were building momentum. Federal task forces were forming. Similar networks nationwide were collapsing. The caregiver faced complete reputation destruction when crime details became public. Family members who trusted them discovered the extent of manipulations and cut off all contact. They lost home, savings, and community standing permanently. Financial institutions that unknowingly facilitated money laundering faced federal penalties running into substantial amounts. Several banks implemented new screening procedures specifically designed to detect inheritance fraud schemes. Your case had exposed medical professionals who falsified records or provided poisoning substances lost licenses permanently. The doctor who agreed to support false mental health diagnoses faced criminal charges that would result in extensive prison time. Generational protection was activating. Your descendants would inherit supernatural protection. and the eternal legacy of your victory was taking shape. During the same period when the conspiracy collapsed from spiritual pressure and legal scrutiny, your life flourished in ways that exceeded even the original inheritance your grandparents had left. Practitioners were fleeing in terror. Legal settlements were building. Federal task forces were forming. Nationwide networks were collapsing. Your justice platform was creating real change. Legal settlements from the conspiracy were adding substantial amounts to your wealth. Your developing spiritual gifts were attracting opportunities for healing work that paid extraordinarily well. Your reputation, once under attack, was being restored as truth about the conspiracy became known. Property values for inherited real estate were increasing dramatically due to development plans you had no prior knowledge of. Investment accounts your grandparents established were maturing at exactly the right time for maximum benefit. Business opportunities appeared that seemed miraculous in timing and profitability. The contrast between your flourishing life and devastating consequences experienced by enemies was becoming impossible to ignore. People recruited into the conspiracy were distancing themselves from the core group as they witnessed supernatural precision of justice being delivered. Your bloodline's future was being secured. The eternal impact of your story was emerging, and the mathematical precision of cosmic justice was becoming undeniable. Your survival and victory created a platform that allowed you to help other potential victims. Your story became a template for recognizing early warning signs of inheritance-related conspiracies. Support groups formed around families who had experienced similar attacks. The complete life reversal was evident. Federal task forces were forming. Nationwide networks were collapsing. Your justice platform was building momentum. Law enforcement protocols were being created. You discovered that enhanced spiritual gifts included the ability to detect when someone was under attack by dark practitioners. This capability led to consulting work with law enforcement agencies who needed help understanding metaphysical components of crimes they were investigating. Your testimony in court cases helped prosecutors explain to juries how spiritual attacks worked with physical crimes. Your credibility as someone who survived such extensive conspiracy gave weight to evidence that might otherwise have been dismissed as superstition. The inheritance that had been used as bait to lure you into danger became funding for a foundation dedicated to protecting other potential victims. Legal defense funds, safe houses for people needing to escape dangerous situations, educational programs about recognizing manipulation and spiritual warfare. The eternal legacy impact was becoming clear. Mathematical precision of cosmic justice was undeniable. And the ultimate irony of your enemies' failure was about to be revealed. The destruction of the conspiracy against you created waves, extending far beyond your immediate situation. Within a reasonable time frame of arrests, similar networks in other states began collapsing as investigators shared intelligence and connected previously unsolved cases. Legal settlements were multiplying. Nationwide network collapse was happening. Justice platforms were building. New law enforcement protocols were being created. Generational protection was being secured. Your case became the cornerstone of a federal task force dedicated to investigating inheritance fraud schemes. Evidence gathered during your ordeal provided the framework for understanding how these networks operated, recruited new members, and avoided detection for so long. Families across the country who had lost loved ones under suspicious circumstances finally received answers. Numerous deaths ruled suicides or accidents were reopened as homicide investigations. The scope of the criminal enterprise that targeted you was larger than anyone had imagined. Law enforcement agencies began developing new protocols for recognizing signs of inheritance-related foul play. Training programs were created to help investigators identify spiritual components of these crimes, practitioners, rituals, metaphysical elements previously dismissed or ignored. Cosmic justice precision was being demonstrated. The ultimate irony was about to be revealed, and your complete victory over forces of darkness would soon be undeniable. Similar criminal networks across multiple states began experiencing systematic destruction as intelligence from your case was shared with law enforcement agencies nationwide. Federal task forces had formed. Justice platforms were building. Enforcement protocols were being created. Generational bloodline protection was being secured. Descendant inheritance of supernatural gifts was being ensured. The evidence patterns discovered through investigating your case provided templates for recognizing inheritance fraud operations that had been operating undetected for extended periods. Financial transaction analysis revealed money laundering schemes spanning international borders. Practitioner networks that had been involved in suspicious deaths across multiple jurisdictions found themselves under simultaneous investigation. As the spiritual and criminal connections became clear to authorities, your case had served as the keystone that, when removed, caused entire criminal architectures to collapse in coordinated fashion across the country. The ultimate irony was being revealed. Your eternal victory was emerging clearly, and the demonstration that chosen ones are absolutely untouchable when divine forces act was becoming undeniable. Your story became a beacon for other potential victims and their families. Educational programs emerged around recognizing the early warning signs of inheritance-related conspiracies and spiritual attacks. Nationwide networks were collapsing. New protocols were being implemented. Bloodline protection was being secured. Generational gifts were being ensured. Eternal legacy was being created. Support groups formed specifically for families who had experienced similar attacks. Your enhanced spiritual abilities allowed you to detect when someone was currently under assault by dark practitioners, leading to consulting opportunities with law enforcement. Your testimony in court cases provided prosecutors with frameworks for explaining to juries how spiritual attacks coordinated with physical crimes. Your credibility as someone who had survived such an extensive conspiracy gave weight to evidence that might otherwise be dismissed. The foundation you established with inheritance funds provided legal defense for other victims, safe houses for people escaping dangerous situations, and educational resources about recognizing manipulation and spiritual warfare. The ultimate irony and eternal victory that emerged from your complete triumph over darkness was becoming undeniable. Training programs emerged across federal agencies, specifically designed to help investigators identify and understand the metaphysical components of inheritance fraud crimes. Justice platforms were building. Generational protection was being secured. Descendant gifts were being ensured. Eternal legacy impact was being created. Cosmic justice precision was being demonstrated. New screening procedures were implemented at financial institutions to detect the specific patterns of money movement associated with inheritance fraud schemes. International cooperation protocols were established to track practitioners who move between countries. Medical licensing boards implemented enhanced oversight procedures designed to identify healthcare professionals willing to participate in fraudulent diagnosis and poisoning schemes. The spiritual warfare training you provided to law enforcement created entirely new investigative capabilities that had never existed before in federal agencies. Your victory had transformed not just your own life, but entire systems of justice and protection. The inheritance was never really about money or property. It had been a test designed to expose every enemy while positioning you for extraordinary blessing beyond anything your grandparents could have imagined. Your grandparents, whether consciously or not, had created a scenario that would identify who in your life could be trusted and who needed to be removed. The conspiracy's failure wasn't just due to your protection, it was orchestrated by divine intelligence that turned their own greed against them. The people who betrayed you revealed their true nature and were removed permanently. The people who remained loyal were blessed along with you. The institutions that served justice were strengthened. You gained wisdom about spiritual warfare that would serve you for life. What the conspiracy thought was an easy target turned out to be someone with backing they couldn't comprehend. Ancient bloodlines with protective agreements honored for centuries. Divine appointment to a purpose requiring this level of supernatural defense. Your enemies learned too late that your destiny was never in their hands. The forces protecting you had been planning their defeat from the moment they decided to come against you. Every step they took toward harming you was actually a step toward their own destruction. The inheritance was the bait. The trap was never set for you. It was set for them, and they walked into it willingly, guided by greed and spiritual blindness. Your story stands as eternal proof that no weapon formed against chosen ones can prosper, and that divine protection operates with thoroughness. That leaves no enemy standing and no victory incomplete. The conspiracy failed completely. Your inheritance was secured and multiplied beyond imagination. Your enemies were neutralized permanently, and your destiny as a chosen one was confirmed in ways that left no room for doubt. This is what divine protection looks like when activated by sustained attacks against someone who carries ancient bloodline agreements. This is what happens when ordinary people attempt to wage war against extraordinary protection. Your victory was total. Their defeat was devastating. And the lesson was clear for anyone with eyes to see. Chosen ones are absolutely untouchable. When divine forces decide to demonstrate their power,